Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our second open learning session for this year. It's part of the Social Enterprise Development Initiative. Today will be convened by Just Gold. Now, these open learning sessions are a space for the Australian social enterprise community to share their knowledge, stories, skills, and experience with each other. My name is Athanasia Price, and on behalf of Social Enterprise Australia, I'm really excited to welcome our wonderful speakers today. We are in the Zoom room with Kyriakos Gold, Rebecca McCash, they're coming on screen now, Anita Ahern and Georgia Pratis. As you know, because you signed up for it, today's session is Autistic Pride and Entrepreneurship in the Australian Social Enterprise Sector. And I really love that we get the chance to learn from real, personal and professional lived experiences here. I know that there are so many things that we can and should do as social enterprise leaders and learners to create more supportive environments for neurodiverse talents. It's certainly something that I'm continuing to learn about. And before I do hand over to this amazing group of people, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the unceded lands from which each of us are joining today. I'm coming to you from the beautiful lands of the Kondamuka people, which you can see in my background behind me. I recognize their continuing connection to the waters, the sky, and country that I have real great privilege of living, playing, and working on. I honor the living knowledges of elders, past and present, and thank them for the strength, wisdom, and power they share with future generations of knowledge and culture holders. I also pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participants joining today. And I recognise that your presence here holds over 65,000 years of systems thinking and relational care for people and planet. So thank you. Now, it is a pleasure to hand over to Kyriakos Gold and his co-collaborators, Rebecca, Anita, and Georgia.
Thank you, Athanasia. The immortal one in translation to your name. Thank you for having us here, and thank you to ACA for allowing us to have the conversation about autistic entrepreneurship, a topic that is very close to our hearts, and a topic that unfortunately doesn't get the necessary attention in policy as yet, but we are very optimistic to see now with the strategy in the federal space, the Autistic National Strategy, to see some changes being implemented, and hopefully this will be the first of many conversations in our sector outside the bubble of the autistic community. This is a first for our team. Normally, we have autistic entrepreneurship conferences that all the speakers are autistic or family or strong allies. This is a first step to talking to the whole sector. So really appreciative of the opportunity. I'm Kyriakos. I'm the founder and CEO of Just Gold. Just Gold is Australia's first management consultancy and creative agency that is an accredited social enterprise. We're social traders and people and planet first accredited. And we've been around for 6 years. Throughout our journey, we've always been autistic owned and led, but we were not out of the closet. So the last couple of years, we've been talking to our community a bit more, and our impact has been structured around our community and supporting autistic entrepreneurs. With me today, I have the fabulous Rebecca McCash, who is the founder and CEO of Future Tech Australia and a member of our Autistic Initiatives Advisory Group. Thank you for joining us, Rebecca. We have Anita Ahern. She's extraordinary. She is behind the Australia's only directory for autistic and neurodivergence initiatives living on the spectrum, also part of our Autistic Initiatives Advisory Group. Anita, very privileged to have you with us. Thank you for stepping in with all the challenges that life throws at us over the last few weeks. And Georgie Pratis, a strong business partner and personal friend. Georgie is one of the principal consultants at Myriad Kofkin Global, who is home to Australia's best and best known and most credible intersectionality consultants. We work with them really closely. And to give you the level of the work that Georgie produces, we recently completed the intersectionality framework for the Australian Sports Commission's governance, which will change the face of sport nationally over the next few years. Georgie, thank you for being here today. This format, and I will stop talking, I'm a big talker, you'll find out through the next few minutes. This format is slightly different. We wanted to cater to the excited minds of the autistic community and our fellow ADHDers. So we are going to have multiple layers. We're going to cross two videos. First, where we're going to have with us Dr. Sharon Zitkovich, one of the most brilliant minds of the autistic community. 7 degrees, I think, by now. She's going for her 8. We'll have Christina Chan, also a member of our advisory group. And you'll see Anita and Rebecca in those videos as well, because those videos were filmed in our most recent Autistic Pride Day conference in Sydney, and they have not been published before. So this is our first off. We haven't even put our digital event on, and we're very privileged to be sharing it with you. Cara, I will go to the first video where we're going to look at some definitions first. And during the video, you are all welcome to start conversing with us in the chat. We'll be able to answer live some questions, and then some of those questions we'll be able to tackle all together in the in-between sections of the webinar when we cross back to the live conversation. If you're ready, Cara, we can go to the video.
Autistic cognition. So I think that's just a recognition that, you know, autistic people's cognition is different than what is classed as neurotypical, and it makes a big difference in business development, because business development is usually, you know, taking a business planning or a business model canvas type approach. It's based on prediction. We like control. So it's kind of like you're predicting something and you're kind of like looking at it and thinking, well, this doesn't make sense because it's not real. It's not something I can touch, sort of stuff. I can't control this. So straight away, the business development process, because of our cognition, there's a mismatch. Also, the research says that most autistic people are bottom-up thinkers. We're starting with all the data sets from our monotropic interest areas, where the business development approach is very top-down. Everything's framed and you're kind of like filling in the boxes. So for an autistic person, it's very from your interest areas, you're bottom up, you're making associations between all of this data that you've come together. We're really good at systemizing, so being able to take those associations and develop products we can do like what's called whole product solutions, because we're thinking of it from every angle. So there's all these strengths from being autistic, but it doesn't match the business. Our autistic cognition does not match business development as it's traditionally done.
As you're saying this, I'm just trying to see if I'm fitting that description, and I'm not quite sure I do. But Christina, you're like the expert entrepreneur here. Does that make sense to you? Is that your experience?
Partially, I would say, because we're all different. Yes to the bottom-up thinking. So we focus on the problem and we don't get attached to the solution. The solution always evolves. I personally love agile methodology because, especially in development, it's in 2-week sprints, right? So in 2 weeks, we prepare on what we want to build in development and we don't change, and we just run as intensely as possible and we build. But then underlying that, there's actually a roadmap as well as to what you know you might be building in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. If you've got a bit of burnt out, you can also take the next 2 weeks offline as well. So it really balances the predictability and structure with feedback. And so I think from my perspective, the best thing about the autistic brain is that we're not tied to a solution, and we're constantly looking for feedback, addressing customer needs, because it's all listening to what people need and want and then pushing that back into product development. Yeah, that's probably what I love most.
That, I think, described me. So, like, maybe there's some alignment here. Rue, what are your thoughts?
So I obviously work with startup founders day in, day out. And to be honest, they've all got pretty brilliant, interesting, exotic brains. But I will say, yeah, certainly autistic and neurodivergent folks are overrepresented in that group, and we know that from the data too. But I would certainly say that the out-of-the-box thinking and the ability to map disparate points and connect them in a way that other people aren't seeing for problem solving is really, well, it's compelling, but it's also what allows them to, manifest, if you like, interesting entrepreneurship kind of pursuits. And so it's a different kind of creativity really that I think comes through, and it's really perfect for entrepreneurship because we need these different thinkers to solve the great problems that we're facing.
So I definitely agree with the idea about getting attached to a problem and not a solution. I think we spoke about this earlier as well, like the constant feedback and constant evolving nature of what we do at Future Tech. We change every week based on feedback. So I think that's a real asset to be able to sort of constantly evolve like that and respond to challenging situations that are complex and constantly changing themselves. My brain definitely works in that systems way. So for me, actually, Future Tech was a system solution. I saw that the world had lots and lots of challenges, and I knew that I alone could not fix all of those challenges. And I knew that people with brains like my brothers could be the ones to fix those challenges. And so my system solution to all the challenges in the world became Future Tech, and, uplifting these kids to be able to solve the solutions for us all. But I think it comes with unique challenges as well. For example, it's really, really hard to explain to people what is going on in my head a lot of the time. And so while I see all of the connections constantly, trying to get that out to other people, out to funders, out to the community can be really difficult. So learning how to sort of talk about things through different lenses has become really important for us at Future Tech, but it also kind of feels like we don't do it justice when we just talk about, the outcomes and the outputs. I'm like, this is going to fix the whole world. So, yeah.
In the social enterprise, social entrepreneurship space, we're comfortable in Australia. We've got a pretty common definition of what social enterprise is, and we're kind of like using the term social entrepreneurship and social enterprise interchangeably. But if we go back 45 years ago, when the term social entrepreneurship was first coined, the definition back then had nothing to do with having a business. It was about creating systems change, and it was about social innovation. And if you look at the Skoll Centre for Entrepreneurship at Oxford University, they threw out their business planning competition because they wanted to go back to what the original meaning of social entrepreneurship was. And if I look at what's happening with Autistic Pride Day, this is social entrepreneurship. You're going for it, whether it's a business proposition or not. You're going for it because you're creating systems change, you're being entrepreneurial in how you do it. I think there's a big difference between being an entrepreneur and being a small business owner.
What does that design justice mean?
There's a whole design justice network, and it actually started off with it was led by I think the book was written by a transgender person who had this difficulty going through airports, and all of a sudden their body shape was not seen as what was supposed to go through the system, and so they were constantly getting picked up. And the principles of design justice is very much about how do we design for everyone, not for a specific norm sort of thing. And I think that the design justice principles, even with business development, and I guess this comes back to, you know, my concern about divvying up business processes for the neurotypical and the neurodivergent people in an organisation, is that everything should be designed in a way that more people can be included in all of the processes. And I think, you know, as someone who was involved in a tech business, and the tech that was designed wasn't accommodating for me, now I'm seeing that, you know, from the 1st of July next year, to sell into Europe, your web-based solution has got to satisfy disability guidelines. So I think, you know, if we cater to something that, oh, the neurotypical people can do that, eventually everything's going to be moving to more of a design justice. And I think we're in a really good position to actually look at inclusivity in all of the operations of a business, so that we can be inclusive of people who are wanting employment in different aspects of a business as well.
Oh, interesting. I apologize on the lagging of the video. It's the internet sometimes is not our friend. And I also want to acknowledge the amazing Rue Harris, who is leading Scale Investors, a female leading a venture capital firm, who is also part of our advisory committee on our Autistic Pride conferences. Before I go to Rebecca and ask about the unique characteristics of a neurodivergent leader, I wanted to tell you that June 18th is a day where we celebrate Autistic Pride. What that means, because a lot of straight people think, I'm doing this the autistic bland way, a lot of straight people think that Pride is only for the gays, but Pride is for everyone. And June 18th is a day that autistic people celebrate their autism, looking at it through a strengths-based approach. We noticed that Just Gold that day, although it's global and recognized because of the pandemic, had actually stopped being celebrated. So what we've done is we've created a digital toolkit that is distributed to over 500 people and organizations globally, some of them councils in the UK and Canada, where people can actually use templates in social media to use every year's campaign, similar to what we do on International Women's Day. So that initiative then became our Autistic Pride Day conference, and that conference ended up being our Autistic Entrepreneurship flagship event, where we talk about these things. Now, it's not my turn anymore. Rebecca, what are the distinct characteristics of a neurodivergent leader, and give us the advantages, because we'll talk about the challenges later.
Thanks, Kyrikos. So I think a lot was covered in that video. I really do believe that we're natural systems thinkers, and this can mean that we often get to the root of problems rather than sort of the surface level of what the problems may appear to be. We can really dig deep and find where within that system the problem is beginning, and where we can sort of target to create change. I think we're a little bit tenacious as well, and that sort of helps. The idea that we get attached to a problem, not a solution. Like, I know that I will always be attached to the problem of trying to make the world better for neurodivergent people. How I do that might change over time and evolve. But it means that, yes, it's like a laser kind of focus. I also think that there are some unique strengths within leadership for autistic people and autistic leaders. I definitely found with Future Tech, we really set up systems from day one that were supportive of our autistic and neurodivergent team. We have systems that some larger companies and very experienced companies don't have in place. And we've done that out of sort of a necessity, because
We're all different and we all need a little bit extra support, but it means that we really set these systems up from the beginning, which I think is really, really special and helps with that empathy as well.
I'm going to go to Anita next, but I'll give you an example. When we first built Just Gold and we were looking at certification, we were told, okay, these are the 3 categories. You have to fit in one of those. And I said, but we do all 3. And they said, no, you have to fit in one of these 3. I said, no, we're going to do everything. You put us in whatever category you want. So for me, it was a matter of like, everything has to make sense. But in Australia, we live in it's one of the safest countries in the world. We're so privileged, but at the same time, we're so overregulated, which makes us think, not in the way autistic boxes are, but it makes us think in boxes where we don't innovate because we're like, okay, this is all I can do. So I feel that in my case, it was like, well, why can't we also do this? So Anita, what do you think are the neurodivergent advantages, and especially what do neurodivergent leaders bring to the social enterprise sector and social enterprise leadership and innovation?
Look, I think really, the authenticity that comes with our mission and our passions really sets us apart. As neurodivergent leaders and entrepreneurs, we can't fake it. We're either in it or we're not. And if we're not in it, we just cannot do what we want to do, or we can't do it any justice. And we often fail, and we don't fail in a business sense. We fail with our mental health, and we fail with our own well-being. And I think as a neurodivergent leader, authenticity is probably our greatest gift, but it's also our greatest downfall, right? Because we put so much pressure on ourselves to fulfill our end goal, because we, as Sharon said in that first video, we often start from the bottom up. For myself, I saw that there was no national autism directory, and instead of doing what I should have done was a business plan and spoken to people and got some consumer feedback and done the polls, and I went straight out and spent the money and built the product. Now, did it work? Sure, it worked. Is it going wonderfully smooth all the time? Absolutely not. I'm literally figuring it out as we speak. And I think if you ask any neurodivergent entrepreneur, we are doing that. And I think there comes a wonderful advancement that comes from that freedom of figuring out as we go, because we're not constructed, we're not in that conformity, we're not following that straight line. We sometimes know following the straight line does not work. So veering off and trying all different things is a huge advantage. So I think authenticity has to be the underlying, into any good entrepreneurial neurodivergent leader.
We're building the plane as we're flying it. Is that the right way of putting it?
100%, yeah.
And I've often thought in the activities that I followed at Just Gold that we were just way ahead of the societal expectation or market appetite. And as I'm learning, because we're learning as entrepreneurs and leaders every day, I'm learning to park an idea and fight the autistic urge to just do it now, like park it, register it, IP it, and keep talking to people, and the right funder or the right person will come along. Although what Just Gold does spends all its profits to ideas we really, really love, much like the Autistic Conference. Georgie, I'm going to throw you a curveball. You're not expecting this one, but because you are not identifying as autistic in this space, and I want you to tell me what it is like working with a very autistic person like me, and give me some good and some bad, because you work really closely with me. So I think it's better coming from your perspective.
You've really put me in the deep end here, Kyriakos. Oh, the good and the challenges. This is a hard one. I think your lens is incredible, and I've always admired the different way of thinking, of looking at things from different perspectives, and I think that lends itself so beautifully to innovation. So it forces me to look at alternative lenses in the work that we do. And I value that so much. I think it's incredible. I'd say the challenge for me is slowing you down. So I can make sense. So, it's, I've heard Rebecca speak about it, and Anita as well, as, you think of an idea and off you go, rush off. And that neurotypical brain is like, let's slow down a minute. So finding that balance without, shutting down those incredible ideas, but helping it make sense to me, as a neurotypical person, is something that I have learned and I really value in working with you.
Well, that's
but
a great point.
It does take, suspending those points of assumption and climbing up that ladder of inference around, and really listening intently. Yeah.
That's a really great point, and we are going to talk to this a little. We're going to do this like a TV show, and we are going to talk about the challenges of an autistic entrepreneur a little bit later. When we go into that, how do you train yourself? Do you need a translator? Who is your translator? Do you have that trust? How safe is it for both sides of that conversation? Rebecca will have a question for you. Could you give us, it's from Athanasia, could we have an example of those processes that you were referring to before? And after that, we'll go to the next two questions.
Sure. I was just answering in the chat, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is a very lot of text, and I don't know if anyone would want to read it. I will put it there just in case people find it helpful. But basically, there are little things that we do. So when we have a new team member coming on, we will send them a visual story. So we essentially treat our mentors and our team the same way that we would be supporting our young people and families. We find this is really helpful. We also have a bit of an attitude where if someone gets something wrong, I usually look at myself and think, what did I do, not do? What wasn't clear about this? How can I make it easier, more accessible, more straightforward next time, so that people don't make the same mistakes, rather than sort of expecting people to always fit within our systems. We adapt our systems in response to our people. And that means that we are constantly improving the things that we do. I really like Dr. Green's concept of people do well when they can. So I usually try and look at, what can I do to make this easier and better for my people, because they're, all incredible.
Thank you, Rebecca. And so Sophia here. Hi, Sophia. Thank you for your support. Says you will always know where you stand with a neurodivergent leader. Open communication and candid dialogue with relation to problems. It helps accelerate the process to finding the solutions. And George is like, he's so blunt, I can't deal with him sometimes. Marian, I'm sorry for pronouncing your name wrong, says that when volunteering over the last 5 days with ex-cycle and Alfred, I've realized that as a neurodivergent leader, I have a superpower that many of colleagues don't have. In emergency management, I'm good to pattern recognition, innovating as the situation changes, allocating people to tasks, and bringing the team together in a crisis. I can certainly relate to that. Rebecca and Anita, do you? Anita, do you relate to pattern recognition? Your microphone is off.
Oh, no, that's okay. I might let Rebecca. I was typing and I missed the question in true neurodivergent form. So Rebecca,
that's okay. Do you identify with pattern recognition? Is that something you do? Because I certainly do, and it's troubling me sometimes.
Look, pattern recognition to me really strikes when we talk about pattern recognition in neurodiversity. Everyone, I feel, goes straight to mathematic recognition rather than people recognition. And I should clarify that I cannot find patterns in numbers or systems. I find them very difficult to navigate, in fact, almost impossible. And that has been my biggest struggle in business, is actually seeing those patterns. However, I do see patterns in people's behaviour, and I see patterns in my network, my support groups, my friends, my family. in that I can read people. I think I can read people fairly well, know when people need support and when they don't. And I'm very good at reading situations. So I think in that regard, I'm very good at pattern recognition. And I think that's not talked about and really enough in neurodivergent circles, in that we can really read the room, so to speak, because sometimes we get things very differently. We can be blunt and very direct and very rigid in our own thinking. However, I think we think beyond that a little bit more, and we see those patterns in people and our networks, rather than patterns in, you know, maths and numbers. I think when we're talking
stock
about
market,
everyone,
in the
yeah,
stock
and, you know,
market, we'd all
everyone
be
thinks that,
rich
you know,
then.
yeah. Look, we're not all IT experts. I can attest to that. Even though I run an online platform, I am no IT expert, nor will I ever be an IT expert. And I think that's wherein lies a bit of the barrier in those contexts of how we talk about patterns
And this is the
recognition.
stigma as well, because, you know, you see us here masking 150%, so we can be the, you know, the smiley people with no anxiety that you are supposed to be in a webinar, and inside it's like Dante's hell. But what society is expecting when they think of an autistic leader, they think this math genius or this computer nerd. You know, in a lot of social enterprises that have popped up in this space, most of the time, social enterprises that are led by neurotypical people, they focus on autistic people that work well with maths. We're not all that. Some of us are good in art. Some of us are good in math. Some of us miss a lot of social cues. For me, it's a constant struggle. I know the pattern that you mentioned in terms of getting to know people, and I know that something is wrong in this conversation, but I don't know how to express it in the most linear, simple way that Georgie might. I'm referring to Georgie because he's often my translator, and we've been in very difficult conversations together when, if Georgie wasn't there, it would have been not the desired ending for either party. So autism comes with a lot of strengths, but we're not superheroes. We're just everyday people with our plus and minuses. And, you know, life is difficult for everyone. We just have a different barrier to overcome. I want to go to the next video before we continue this conversation, because we're all talkers here. Cara, if you're ready, please cue the next video and we'll come back with your questions and some new things to talk about.
I think we've got to separate product development from business development, as if we're talking autistic cognition. And so the product development, that associative, that coming together, bringing things, being able to systemize, that's very product development. It's one thing to have a product, it's another thing to have a business, sort of stuff. So the business development part is difficult for autistic people, because you know you've got to bring a lot of stakeholders together on your journey through this, and the business development process is the part where traditionally you're making predictions. So I'm a big fan of what's called effectuation entrepreneurship, which starts off with what's your bird in hand, what do you have, which is, you know, often your monotropic interest, your support system. It's not based on prediction, it's based on what you can control, and it's got a principle of like crazy quilt and bringing different people together.
And just as a side note, what is monotropic interest? So
monotropic interest, you know, they reckon that autistic people have these passionate interests that they generally, the research says we're spending around 26 hours a week on our passions, and so they're interest areas where we have huge data sets because we're into them so much that we've got so many facts. You know, some people are I'm a fact data kind of thinker. Other people are visual thinkers, but we've got these data sets on our interest areas, and it's that we actually make connections between sort of stuff. So we're starting with that often when we're having a business. You know, we've got a passion area. We can see an opportunity. We've got this data set about this, and that's where we're making associations through it.
Christina, what are the challenges and opportunities as far as you're concerned?
I could talk on behalf of my experience. Lots of challenges with business development, which is why I've got, you know, advisors around me that help me either provide support or fill in those gaps. But direct communication is probably one, whether it's like straightforward remarks or just lots of questions because I need to really dig down into what the actual problem is. That in one instance, like I'm happy to do that in an open room because there's transparency and accountability, but it could for some people come across as like intimidating or I don't know, inappropriate. And so there's this kind of notion about social norms, which is usually just, it's typical behaviors that society deems appropriate at a specific point in time, right? But when you look at history, societal norms changes because we recognize that there's an unjust practice here or something doesn't seem right. And I think when I went through my entrepreneurship journey, I did a lot of training where when you first meet someone, this is how you shake their hand. And I went through that training.
Almost like ABA in business.
Yeah, and we kind of fit in because we need to go through pitching because I watched your thing for 2023. But there is a thing that you have to kind of go through in order to establish your business, fundraise, and then, you know, go out and market. I think it got to a certain point where I was like, why is it that I need to shake people's hand? Because if you start looking at from a cultural lens or an autistic lens, but there is all this training out there. The training is to get us to fit that mold though, not as a starting point, and then enable people to bring their lenses to go, is this actually appropriate? So to get others to see that it's just a different way of interacting. So when people go, autistic people are socially not great, or they don't have social skills, I challenge that. I just think we come into the situation in an unconventional way that's just different. So that is the thing that I've been struggling with. I know there's a traditional way of going about business development, but it does need to change.
And for me, you hit the nail on the head when you said culture and that the intersectionality of things. So imagine, and I'll give our example, like Christina on one side and me on the other side, like a darker, bearded man with a really intense voice. If we ask the same question, there'll be different levels of intimidation. In my side, that might be understood as aggression. From your side, it may be like there may be also be some gender deafness. So the other person might not even hear you. So that just makes things really, really difficult. And for an autistic person, you kind of say, but why? Like for me, it's like, but why? I don't understand why that's a problem. So, and no one really answers the why in our journey. And I think it's only now that we're having these conversations and understanding that you're not alone.
One of the biggest challenges I've had with business development is I value consistency in someone's actions and it aligning to the words that are coming out of their mouth. And when that is not there, I struggle because it's like, I don't understand what's going on here. What are you trying to communicate?
Also, but you said that in that meeting at 5:15.
And autistic people are great with pattern recognition. And so that consistency, whether it's that situation or across a time period, it really affects trust. It affects how I can actually work with someone. And it's never bad intentions from the other person. It's typically just the lack of self-awareness. And so that is something that I've also been tackling with as well, knowing that it's not bad intentions, but how do I reconcile with this inconsistency in behavior and words?
like, this is the panel that I want to be a panelist. But like, I struggle like in terms of the notion of accessibility, especially in these leadership positions, because at this point, you are supposed to fit the mold. You're supposed to know exactly what to say, when you say it, and you're supposed to be professional, because you're labeled as unprofessional if you challenge things. And I'm on this board, like, and I think the token autistic, because this board's supposed to be like super accessible. And I've actually been called unprofessional for just being myself. And I know I'm not. But the rest of that board does not understand that they're actually an inaccessible environment that is working in a super unprofessional way. How do you deal with that?
I sat on 3 board roles and got diagnosed with autism a year ago and was like, what the hell am I doing in a board role chairing a forum? Because being able to pick out cues, manage different personalities, have that kind of politics and then navigate it is not an autistic person's happy place, which is why upon reflection, I was like, I was so unhappy. And these were volunteer board roles as well. So I don't have an answer for that, but I can say that I have stepped away from all those board roles because it's not where I want to be spending my time.
So I'm going on a slight tangent, which I'm known for doing, but so something we do see not uncommonly is that the entrepreneur founder gets the backing, they build the business to a certain point. They often have the nutty professor stereotype kind of profile. They may be, exceptionally gifted academically and they're spearheading some STEM, business. And at a certain point in time, they've had to build a team up to a certain point, and then the dynamics of the team and the relationships become really complex, and the investors get concerned about, is this the person to lead for the next stage of scale up and take this business through to exit effectively? Now, this applies for neurotypical founders as well, so I want to be really, really careful about how I sort of frame what I'm saying here. What I do think is really, really interesting is that with the advent of AI, what we're going to be seeing is billion-dollar companies that have a founder and possibly just a couple of team members, like really small teams, and the ability to actually have AI agents who, meet your needs in terms of, personality kind of qualities. I don't think that means we don't still need to advocate for enabling environments, accommodations, and actually learn to build teams around us that work for us. But it's an interesting kind of thing that we're now on the cusp of facing, that, we're going to be able to navigate that differently potentially.
It's super interesting that you said that, because Just Gold is certainly not a billion-dollar company, right? But this is made possible because of AI. Like, it allows me to communicate with different stakeholders in a way that they will make sense to the wickedness of the business plan, and just allows us to push things a lot further. So just a great point. And it's good to know that everyone else is going through it. And also on the data point, like when somebody, the trust is really important, I think, for my version of autism. When somebody gives you a different fact every time that you talk to them, well, it's actually not a fact then. It's like, the operational report has these 3 holes, and in the next meeting, he's got another 4 holes. So like, how can I trust you to continue working with you? Sharon, I can see you've got something to say here.
I think it was just that Roo kind of like introduced it, the difference between entrepreneurship and management, like 2 really different skill sets. And I think autistic people are great entrepreneurs. I would say the management bit is a bit like, I won't own up to too many things, but like the day-to-day management can be difficult.
I think that management and leadership are very different. I think that I am an excellent leader. I actually give myself that pat on the back. The management stuff is really, really hard. It is really hard. Even when you have a team of people who have the same neurotype as you, it's really, really hard to get the balance between supporting people well and getting stuff done.
In true autistic and ADHD fashion, in 8 minutes, we have literally touched on 100 different topics. I don't know how we've done it. And looking back at this session, I think it was a deep psychological, reflective conversation in a safe place where we all kind of looked at different mirrors and tried to understand versions of our autism by looking at others. Because in my case, I can't see my patterns, but I can see them in others. And that's one of the benefits of having these conversations. There are not enough fora or forums in Australia, in Australian, that autistic leaders can feel safe and share and reflect and go back into the businesses and implement that. Now, we are going to go to the intersectionality conversation a little bit later. I'm going to first go a step back and ask, how can social enterprises move beyond simply accommodating neurodivergence to actively leveraging neurodivergent strengths? And I'll start with Rebecca, who is indeed a great leader and a great manager. I have seen you, I have seen you do magic.
Thanks. I appreciate it because it's very different though. Like being a leader and being a manager are very, very different skills. And I think yeah, it's not really talked about a lot. In terms of how social enterprises can support neurodivergent people and really leverage their strengths, I think it's going to take a really large culture shift. So at the moment, a lot of the ways that we see autistic people's strengths are through the lens of what is a strength within the context of a neurotypical dominant world. Sorry, I've just got my doggo here. And usually that's kind of associated with capitalism as well, let's be honest. For example, when we see that autistic people have good pattern recognition, it's good pattern recognition in the context of how we can leverage this for financial gain, or we'll talk about how autistic people are way more efficient than non-autistic people. And I think while these things may be true, I think that we need to go a little bit deeper if we want to actually leverage the strengths of neurodivergent people. And I think that's a bit of an uncomfortable thing for many people because we do like to challenge the status quo. And ironically, neurotypical people generally don't like change. I know this is hilarious because I don't like change either. But I think that we sometimes come in with a completely different way of seeing something. And I know that in the past, I've gotten into trouble because people will say things like, my door is always open. And I take that very literally. So not that I'm barging in at all times of the day, but I will go to managers, to leaders within organizations that I've worked for in the past with my PowerPoint presentation and outline exactly where the problems are within the organization and exactly what can be done to solve those problems. And unfortunately, a lot of the time people will interpret that as what's the word? Challenge to authority, or a challenge to that person's kind of place within the hierarchy. Something I also really, really struggle with because I don't know why we have to talk to people in completely different ways depending on where they sit in a kind of invisible hierarchy. So I think if we do want to start really leveraging those strengths, we all need to work on being okay with and making space for people to come in with different ideas and different ways of seeing things and really, really listen. Yeah.
Before I go to Anita, I'm going to tell you some practical things that I've recommended to neurotypical environments. I said, if you ever think I'm too blunt, or if I raise my voice, or if you feel I'm talking too fast, please let me know. Most autistic people will not mind if you stop them and say, we need to take a breather. And again, we need to be very mindful of the stigma and the biases that come with a diagnosis. Quite often people say, tell me about your diagnosis. And it's just like, well, I'll share this really private thing for two reasons. This is a very private thing, like your detailed diagnosis, but also it creates stereotypes. Like having an autistic person in your team and thinking they're going to be loud, or thinking that they're going to be good at math, or thinking they're going to be good or bad at this. That first understanding of like asking, what are the practical things that we can do for you? Is it a different briefing process? And also, you need to stay with the autistic person, because sometimes we have a delay, some more than others. So when you ask the question for the first time, I might not have the answer for you. I might have it in my dream. I'll wake up the next morning. I'm like, oh, that's the answer. I have to share it. But I will not be able to do that unless you ask me again. And again, that's for me. That works for me. It might not work for the staff. And, it's exactly the same with thinking about every human being. None of us are made the same way. We all have a very different programming, conditioning, and understanding of life. And Georgie, I can see you want to talk to intersectionality, but first I'll go to Anita. And Anita, what are your views on this?
On what we struggle with in traditional business terms, Kyriakis?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how
Look,
can we make more inclusive environments for autistic people and autistic entrepreneurs? They're two different things, like employees and managers and bosses.
I think as entrepreneurs, we, traditional business development models often don't suit us. They're often linear and and rigid, right? So we find it difficult to move in that way, and we find it very hard to move effortlessly through those particular unwritten rules of entrepreneurship. The socializing, the networking, what we perceive as what we should be doing. But I think what we can do is really embrace what our strengths are, and really, as a neurodivergent entrepreneur, it's really important for us to really look within ourselves and find out what our strengths are and leverage those strengths and ask for help on those things that we aren't very strong with. And I've only recently learned to ask for help, because up until recently, asking for help was obviously an admission of failure. And in the business world, if you admit to failure, it's almost as if you're committing business suicide. And you can't do that. But I think as we are becoming more vocal and more informed and more educated on how neurodiversity works in business and in entrepreneurship, I think there comes strength with asking for help and for guidance and working on our strengths. And I think give ourselves permission that it's okay not to follow those linear lines in business, that we can actually veer off and feed to our strengths. Because from a economical viewpoint, business, obviously, Rebecca, you brought this up, it's all capitalism, right? None of us are in business because we love it. If we just wanted to earn a living, we'd all be working at Bunnings, but we're all driven by a purpose to make change. But in order to make change, we need to make revenue. And in order to make revenue, we almost have to sometimes stick to those societal rigidness and lines, because we then obviously get left behind. So there's a huge balance, and I think we need to learn how to balance. And when I say we, as a neurodivergent community, these conversations help us acknowledge where those balances lie, when we can ask for help, when we should ask for help, and when it's okay not to follow what we perceive as the given route for business and entrepreneurship.
So true. And Kin Lee was saying, embed purpose into the Constitution, and a really great segue to talk about social enterprise, because this is a conversation about social and autistic enterprise. And one of the many of the reasons that autistic people are so good at social entrepreneurship is because of our deep passion and purpose for the work that we do. And research says autistic people that work in their special interest area, in the monotropic thinking, as Sharon would say, they're actually more successful. So it's a strong pathway to not just employment, but success and independence. We do have different thinking, which by default makes it innovative thinking. We are resilient. We don't know any different. A lot of people say, oh, when you talk to people with disability, you're going to find that in your everyday scenarios, you go, oh, you're so strong. Oh, you're such a hero. We don't know any different. Like, I went through life for 45 years. I didn't know I was autistic. I just thought everybody goes through the same trouble. You don't have a choice. But yes, you become resilient. And that often that bluntness is what brings the authenticity that is absolutely necessary in social enterprise, if you do social enterprise the right way. I will go to the next video, and right after that, Cara, once you're ready to play the video, we'll go to Georgie and talk to intersectionality and bias, circling back into the topics that we most recently covered.
I often say that we do need translators. I often say that, but it's that danger of your translator, of that relationship breaking down at some point. Sharon?
Yeah, I think, because I have a bit of a few points with regards to neurotypical co-founder sort of relationships, and I think the challenge is not playing it safe and letting the neurotypical person have a lot of say in the establishment of the business and setting up the systems, so that you end up with a business that isn't accommodating. You've got your own business, but it's not accommodating autistic people because you're handing everything over. You know what I mean? Like that can come and bite you. You're losing control. Yeah, all of a sudden you can't do that part of the business, and you can't do that part of the business because it's been set up by a neurotypical person in a certain way, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself more and more removed.
Or you become codependent with that person because you've put so much trust to it, and you've handed so much of the business, but when you realize that that's not feasible, then you actually can't control your business. Going back to your first point, that autistic people need that full control, which is just a cycle. Christina, I see you like thinking about this really hard.
I think it's that diversity and inclusion piece. Like when I did my EdTech startup, I had James, who's sitting over there, as an advisor. I think it depends. If you want a business, it might hit a ceiling because you've developed things in a certain way and it can only scale to a certain point. But if you want it to create the systemic change and want it to grow further, you have to involve all and know that everyone has their strengths, and it might take longer to come to different negotiations and decisions, but it's what's best for the business and the impact you want to create.
One on, I guess, getting support as an autistic entrepreneur. So I find that I'm at quite a high risk of being taken advantage of in terms of getting advice from external people. For example, going out to an accountant, I had no idea how much I should pay for an accountant. Like that was completely, news to me. So I think autistic people can be at a heightened risk. I trust everyone. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. Let's go. So I think, that's one thing around entrepreneurship. And boards, interesting. So I'm doing a diploma at the moment on governance. And I actually think that the traditional board governance structure is just the opposite of what autistic people think and understand in terms of how governance should operate. So you've got these people over here that kind of make all the decisions about the organization, which is here, and the only go-between between these two groups of people is the one person. And to me, that just seems ludicrous. Like it makes no sense whatsoever. So I think one of the things that I've been learning more about is Indigenous governance systems. And I think for me anyway, that makes much, much more sense. It's all about how do we work together? How do we hear everybody's opinions and come up with a solution? And yes, solutions usually take a lot longer to come to, but everyone is heard and usually the solutions are much, much better.
Well, in an ideal governance structure, the CEO is not just representing their thoughts. They have a strong consultative process, not only through the team, but also the client base and broader stakeholder map. But that's just the understanding that a really big business might have, and a medium-sized business or a small business or a not-for-profit might actually not. And because it's, full of community politics, and then it's just a very different state of play. Rue, you wanted something to say?
I think if you step back and acknowledge that autistic entrepreneurs have a very spiky cognitive profile, where that lands you is, all right, so yeah, it's that classic, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses, and then mapping that out within your business and going, all right, so I'm outsourcing this to this person, I'm bringing this person in who, has this strength, and really just sort of sitting down and working out what your optimum team and support group looks like based on the fact that, you need to know yourself and your brain and your processing style at the first instance, and then work from there to kind of make sure you've got the right group around you.
I apologize. I lost the video and I could not hear anything. So I thought it was my turn to speak. So forgive me if I messed up Rue's flow. Now that we're back, I wanted to go to Georgie and get a brief definition of intersectionality, and potentially, if you've got the time, bias, but not too academic. So in simple English, and then we'll see how that affects neurodivergent leaders.
You sure give me the hard tasks, Kyriakos. Look, I've been reflecting and especially listening to Anita and Rebecca, and a lot of what I'm hearing is that the onus of responsibility around creating those inclusive spaces rests with the person that is neurodivergent. So it's really reinforcing and highlighting how much our workspaces, as much as any other space we engage in, is defined around those unspoken rules that have been designed by those in power and privilege who have the voice. So intersectionality, which, as Kyriakos knows, I'm very passionate about, is about unpacking and dismantling those systemic and structural barriers. So it is a term that has been confused a lot, where it's been used a lot of times around adding up different parts of people's identity. That was never the intent. It is actually an analytical framework that helps us understand those intricate structures and systemic roots of oppression that create marginalisation or power and privilege. So it transcends those simplistic notions around diversity. It's not about gender or ability or about ethnic identity. It's about the isms. So how they become embedded in structures that result in exclusion, in ableism, in gender inequality, in racism, all of those isms that we see play out, and which people that sit in those marginalised spaces have to navigate on a daily basis. So it becomes a critical tool for dissecting that and scrutinising those social categories, because they are socially constructed. Think of neurodivergence. Why do we call it neurodivergence and then we call other people neurotypical? Because the world has been designed, those systems of power and privilege have been designed in a way to preference and privilege people who are neurotypical. So that is, as a lens, that's how it works really effectively. It's very hard for me to unpack it in a small amount of time, but it's not the same as diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I don't want it to get confused with that, because it actually is a critical tool and calling upon leaders in organisations to really address those power disparities that exist towards that collective vision around justice and equity. But it's certainly not about ignoring positionality or placing the onus of responsibility on the individual. It really needs to start by those in leadership, undertaking that critical reflection that acknowledges privilege, that acknowledges bias. What are my stereotypes? How have I socially constructed throughout my lived experience what it means to be neurodiverse, or what it might mean to be a woman, a trans person, someone that's gender diverse. What does ethnicity mean to me? What are those racial constructs? Because they're all interrelated. Even experiences as a neurodivergent person will not be the same for someone that is visibly a person of colour. There are compounding factors that are systemically and structurally created. So it's about how do we consider how are the voices of other of difference, not just represented, but actually heard and informed decision-making around change. So that's a very succinct description. I don't know how helpful it is, but if you
Okay, here's a
question.
Here's a question.
Okay.
Because we have about 8 minutes left.
Okay.
So here's a question. Like Christina was talking before, and she talked about the handshake, and she said you add a cultural element to that, and it just gets even more confusing. I'm Greek. Quite often, like after my diagnosis, people were saying, oh, he's too Greek. Now he's too blunt because he's autistic. How does intersectionality play there in terms of the tags that are applied to you as a leader?
Great question. Why do we train people to fit this mold that, again, has been constructed by power and privilege to moving beyond that, move beyond these, these neurotypical behaviors around eye contact or handshaking and all of those things you've discussed. And why don't we consider different options and think about, if I try and think of some examples off the top of my head, how do we create spaces where people can bring their authentic selves to work rather than, going directly to those expectations? Yeah. What do different communications look like rather than complying with those social norms? I don't know if that's quite answered your question.
So, for example, because I know we've got people from government in this conversation, right? So as an autistic community, what we're asking as autistic entrepreneurs is specific funding and specific programs for autistic entrepreneurs. So autistic entrepreneurs being funded to run their own programs. But within that, what would be the intersectional component? Would you then break it into like autistic women and autistic multicultural, or would it say, what would be the framework? So give us that understanding.
It would be asking those funders to really unpack their processes and systems. So we're asking, a neurodiverse social enterprise might be asking for funding. What does my application process and interview process look like? And have I considered and looked at alternative ways that actually embrace and support, the innovation and the potential that comes with that diversity? Or am I stuck with a structure? This is the way we do it. This is the way applications must be completed. Interview processes, do they take into consideration how that, you were saying earlier, you're in this webinar, but what people can't see, what's hidden under that, that iceberg beneath the surface is all of those factors, all of those responses to being in this space. We aren't considering those in the way we put processes and systems and structures in place. That's the biggest barrier, and that's what intersectionality does. That's why I talk about it as a tool for critical analysis. If people want to know more, I don't know how much time I've got left. I'm looking at the time QR, and I know I don't have a lot of time, but
we don't have a lot of time.
I would really encourage people who are on this webinar and you can just Google it, you'll find it very easily. Kyriakos referred earlier to the Australian Sports Commission's Intersectionality Roadmap. And that was work that we completed together, which really looks at the sports sector, but it can be applied to other sectors to undertake that critical process of intersectional analysis and unpack, because systems and structures, think about how they've been designed. I see all too often that, that token representation of the diverse person on our board or our decision-making body. But do we consider how that voice is heard, how that voice contributes to decision-making? Do they feel safe to be open and really talk about those issues in that space? Often they're not. So this really helps to unpack how we go about decision-making, how we go about developing policies, systems, structures. It goes back to those very systems and structures that put those barriers in place in the first place. So the onus rests with those leadership decisions, with those governance decisions, rather than an individual who ends up facing multiple barriers because systems aren't created for them. I don't want to see a future where Rebecca or Anita or yourself, Kyriakos, have to navigate and change your nature without being able to bring your whole selves to what you do, and having your incredible, thinking and innovation recognized, to be focused instead on having to navigate and try and dismantle those barriers individually. It's not social justice.
Thank you, Georgie. I have put the resource in the chat. The federal government has spent a few $100,000 in this. It's a really big document, but it's a really, really strong framework, and all the research is there. The more simple tools are not yet posted online, but please use that resource. Our government has spent money on it. This is where our systems are heading to. You'll understand better what to ask for yourselves, and or if you're neurotypical in a position of power, you know what you need to do to make everybody set up for success. We have very little time. We could be talking forever, but what I want to close with, I want to close with 2 questions to Rebecca and Anita. And, I want you to, this was not in our planning, but this is where the conversation has taken us. If you were asking someone for reasonable adjustments in your relationship, it doesn't have to be, could be a boss, it could be somebody that is working for you, what would that be? And if you were asking the government, somebody in a position of power, to change the system, what would be the first thing that you'd be asking for? Rebecca, can we start with you?
Wow. Okay. So accommodations for me,
You can make it general if it's too personal. Yeah, you can make it general if it's too personal.
Okay, so I think flexibility is massive. Why do things need to be done in these very sort of stringent, inflexible formats? Like, why can't I do it in a way that works for me? If it works for me and it gets the job done, why can't I do it that way? Working from home is huge. It's really, really huge for me personally. I don't think I would be able to do all the things that I do if I wasn't able to work from home. Being clear with expectations, very, very important. Calling it out if there is, something that someone is getting wrong. How can we make that clearer? Simple things like making it clear that it's okay to get people back on track in a meeting, like at the very beginning, then I don't have to feel guilty about doing that. That's the expectation. So little things like that can make a big, big difference. Positive feedback, just as important as negative feedback. A lot of the time we are really good at giving negative feedback, but not letting people know that they're on track. Especially if I'm learning something new, I really need to be told that I'm on the right track. Otherwise, I feel sort of like I'm just floating in the abyss. I don't know if I'm on the right track or the wrong track. I'm kind of just, so people letting me know like that, yep, that's great. You're doing a really good job with that. That's really important for me. The wider system stuff is probably it's large. I think the main thing is the idea of self-determination. So that's something that I always come back to. I think that autistic people, we as autistic people, we have the solutions, we have the strategies, we have the different opportunities. I have such a diverse range of neurodivergent friends who are artists, who are designers, who are programmers, yes, but in all different areas of society. So how can we be supporting neurodivergent autistic people to solve the solutions that autistic people face, rather than asking just for our opinions? How can we actually uplift the people that are already there?
Thank you, Rebecca. We'll quickly go to Anita because we're running out of time and we're gonna take another 5 minutes to complete this webinar. I hope you can join us. Thank you, Cheryl, for being there in the back end. Anita?
Quick, geez, talk about pressure. Okay, I have a list. So in my personal life, I struggle to read and I have dysgraphia, so I struggle to write. So I don't think lots of people actually realise the impact of not being able to read and write sufficiently has on just everyday life. So I think if my family and friends could accommodate that, or my work colleagues could sort of bear that in mind, I think that has a huge impact on the way that I can access everything in life, from filling out forms, doctors, medical, employment, education, and also, on a personal level, social events. People will, family will often invite you. Rebecca, I don't know if you feel this, they'll come along and come and hang out with me on the weekend. I'm not doing anything. Well, I need to know what you're doing, what you're meeting, what you're going to be doing, where will we be eating, so I can research the menu. And I think those things may seem quite basic, and that can have a huge impact on how my ability to make those connections in the community and with my friends and family. And with government, I have lots, but I have one thing that I think the government can do straight off the bat that can have a huge impact in everybody's entrepreneurial journey and also their business journey. And I believe fundamentally that every person that applies for an ABN should have to do some type of training on neurodiversity. And whether that's a simple questionnaire online, whether that's a short 20-minute webinar, I think if you are opening a business in Australia, you need to know that there are neurodivergent people who will be working with you and will be your clients and customers. And I think that one small thing can make a huge impact.
It is that point of this conversation that make me emotional. Probably people won't understand why it makes me so emotional, because it's those little things that can really change our lives. In true autistic fashion, we have given you a lot of examples and theories about what our needs are. But if I was to summarize this, I would say, don't put us in a box. Don't use terms like high functioning, low functioning, because you don't know what's inside. Don't judge a book. There's a lot of don'ts here. Don't judge a book by its cover. What we make seem effortless, it is so difficult. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I put an application for a disability fund. Brilliant project. I can tell you it was a brilliant. I can judge that. When it came to uploading the supporting documents, I failed that. It was that simple thing that when we're asking for reasonable adjustments from government, it's truly make accessible the programs that are there for us. And also autistic enterprise, autistic social entrepreneurship, it's nowhere to be seen in policy, or if it's seen, there are no programs attached to it. So self-determination, as Rebecca said, if that's what we can leave you with, I would be really, really, really happy. Privileged to be here. Thank you, Athanasia. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us. And thank you to our panel.
Oh, thank you all. That was amazing. I've been scribbling the whole way. Thank you. If you're watching the video of this, share this with everyone. So really, really appreciate this today, everybody. Huge thanks also to the Department of Social Services, who are supporting the development of these learning communities. In a second, you're going to see, if you're still online, I hope, a form pop up, I believe, a survey, because we want these sessions, here it is, we want these sessions to be crafted by you, by the people who are watching them. So do share the feedback. Thank you. Also, I can't forget the Social Enterprise Australia team behind the scenes, everyone working to make these happen. There's Cara, there's Megan, there's Cheryl, there's Liz, there's Ray Lee, there's Christina, there's Jess. There are some neurodivergent people in there who I bet are thinking, thank goodness the rest of my team has seen that. So thank you. Really appreciate you all. And thank you to everyone who logged on.